Hi, everybody. I'm your moderator for this evening. So if you're going to change this session and probably a cocktail, so hopefully we can stick it out. I think there's going to be some great content available for amazing experts. I'm Tamara Stephens. I lead the venture fund for Thompson Reuters. We invest in Series N and tech, lots of AI. So if you're a startup, try to find you off here. I'll let the rest of my panelists introduce themselves.
Okay, my name is Virgil Dotson. I'm a product marketing director for AI and analytics products at OpenText. You see us in the exhibit hall there.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rita Ganekar. I lead data and analytics for Treasury Services at BNY Mellon.
Hi, everyone. My name is Peter Wang. I'm the co-founder and chief AI officer for Anaconda, create popular Python data science tools and create data ecosystems.
Hi, I'm Elaine Huang. I'm a senior director in Verizon Enterprise Data Analytics Hub. I lead the shared analytics service function for Verizon Enterprise.
So let's get started. I know our panel title has that responsible in it, so all of our questions will be responsible to Virgil, what challenges are you seeing for companies integrating AI with their BI systems to enhance decision-making processes?
So we live in this world of data and AI, and lots of data. So it's a good thing that AI is along for the ride. But data is really everywhere. It's sitting in different silos. It's in your SharePoint. It's in Workday. It's in Salesforce, right? And it's hard to manage, hard to wrangle for the purpose of analytics or reporting, right? So what's needed is a foundation for AI. We're grouping all that data. But that, once you do and start asking questions of that with LLM, you get a second challenge, and that is that LLMs can lie. Right? You guys heard that all day. You can ask a question like, what were my top 3 products sold last quarter? And it's going to do its best to go and find that textual answer somewhere, give you its best answer, which may or may not be correct. So there's a lot of work that has to happen between that initial prompt and that other prompt that really goes to creation. So we've done some work between there as well that helps turn that into a prompt that's a generated report that does this. Now, the good news is once you've done that part, made that mapping, and have that LLMs done, you can kind of shift some of that work back to the user and let them ask the question themselves instead of going to the data analyst.
Thanks, Virgil. And Rita, you have a finance background, obviously with BNY, so would you like to share your opinion on?
Sure. Thanks, Tamara. So coming from the banking world, this integration of BI with AI is not so much about just technology deployment. It actually is a complete process reengineering effort, and exactly what Virgil said, that rests on good data. It's about ensuring compliance, and it's also about fostering a sense of trust. If you can navigate through these challenges, then AI-enabled BI becomes truly transformative for the business. So let me just break down these 3 silos, right? The first one, data, I think it's that 4-letter word that nobody wants to talk about, but it's so critical. You need to have a data ecosystem where your data is not siloed. In the banking world, most of your data is sitting on these legacy monolithic systems. So there has to be an effort to aggregate it, to put in the right governance, to put in the right taxonomies and your canonical data models and what have you. So that's a huge challenge that banks have to overcome before they can really have AI be put to good use. Second is compliance. Now, banking is one of the most regulated industries. Pharmaceutical is one other such industry. Looking at all the regulations out there, and there were some phenomenal sessions this morning, you have GDPR, you have CCPA. Your AI models need to make sure that they have taken into account some of these, not into account some of these, but all of the implications of these compliance and policies before that output can be used. And the last one is algorithmic bias and fairness. Again, in the banking world, very critical, because you do not want your AI model to perpetuate any kind of discriminatory practices. You're talking about credit scoring, you're talking about fraud alerting. So these become very critical functions where you need explainable AI. You need not these black box models, but something that can actually provide that sort of audit trail to what your model has already done. If these challenges can be navigated, then AI truly is that transformative catalyst into more automation.
Yeah, I think the the question of how AI can transform, revolutionize BI is, I look at the lens of what we learned in the data science adoption and the adoption of open data science tools into business over the last 10 years. And what's very interesting was that, we thought, the Python community and data science community, we thought that having a language like Python would be something that could enable something like civic data science. We thought that it would be really accessible. That was before we knew about LLMs, so we could actually program in English, right? So we thought programming Python was pretty easy. Programming English was easier. But the lessons we learned there was that even if you had people empowered with these really incredible data science tools, and they work in conjunction with data analysts, classical BI tools, the issue we're right into is exactly as I said, these data silos. That traditional business IT architecture is still rooted, I would say, 1970s kind of mentality, right? Where you really got, here's the data, here's the infrastructure, here's the code, and there's line of business users floating somewhere. And I think that kind of mindset, we run into that all the time of data science operationalization and enablement perspective. I think that's going to hit everyone like hot whips as they try to adopt AI. Because if you think, some Python coders trying to access data set, think about all the people in the business field, right, trying to get all that data. You can't shy away from that problem if you actually want to adopt AI in a serious way. It is a matter of empowerment. So I think for me, a lot of the issues that were brought up by the previous answers, all are there, they're all great, but it's really sort of organization issue. Teams have to have that buy-in, very highest executive level, that this is a transformation. It's an architectural transformation for the business. It's a paradigm shift in how we manage risk and manage these kinds of things. Ultimately, the center of the conversation has to be about empowerment of all of those users across the enterprise. And I think everyone takes that lip service, but we have to do that really for real in order to get dogs from AI. For all the items.
Couldn't agree more. Elaine, your thoughts?
Sure. Yeah, I think as many of you may know that AI technology itself is not new, and using advanced analytics AI capabilities like natural language processing within AI BI applications are not something new as well. But just with recent technology, and it really bring our self-serve capabilities for BI solutions to that next level, allow your users can really perform and converse with your application is a cool thing. But associated with that, there are many challenges as well. Number one is, many of you perhaps already have a BI application on site. So do you buy or do you build yourself, right? Regardless if you buy or build, and you have to face that challenge to justify for your investment, where do you calculate that ROI? There will be some sunken cost, will be hard to put in quantified numbers. And associated with your ROI, you have to have a certain decent adoptions. So usage is another concern. As cool as AI, like shiny new toys, you may still face some resistance, things related to the trust, right? How do you prevent from hallucinations? How do you have explainabilities? All those things together will have a impact on your final justification. So all things taken into consideration will drive the success of your successful BI AI implementations, in my mind.
Thank you. So question number 2, start with you, Peter. This is related to AI-driven risk management. And the question is, how can AI be leveraged to enhance risk management, and what are some specific examples where AI has successfully identified and mitigated potential risks?
So the scope of the question is actually really interesting, because if you think about the different kinds of sources of risk that exist in the business, we tend to think about maybe some operational risk, technical risk, things like that. And AI can be used in many of these different ways. But there's also very, very specific kinds of business practice risk, which I feel like in my consulting practices and in working with some of our customers, where we see a lot of sort of hidden risks in business processes are when context is lost between different groups. So if you have a technical group implementing something, and you have a business group that has written the specification meaning something else, or meaning something, and the technical group implements it somewhat differently, And this kind of context loss can manifest in many different ways. It can be, the specs are kind of inaccurate, or I think someone mentioned about semantics, right? The actual formal semantics of what things mean in the business, having a reference, actual reference, data model, all these kinds of things we know are best practices, but in the frenetic pace of development, they can sometimes get lost. And this is a really, really interesting aspect of AI technologies that I think people maybe are only now starting to realize, that we are able to take English language, which is somewhat of an informal thing, a lot of business emails, business documentation, all written in English, and we're able to have an automated way of turning that into, sometimes maybe a little bit hallucinatory, but still a lot closer to what looks like formal specification. And so I think LLMs as a way of facilitating a much deeper, much more accurate connection between the business stakeholders and the people who are developing the technical solutions, that's an amazing way to mitigate that business aspect of the risk. That being said, the more you ask for concrete examples, and the real example that I have actually of LLMs alleviating risk is actually more in an operational capacity, where we have one customer that has been using a variety of standard machine learning tools to automate a manufacturing pipeline, but they recently started adopting LLMs to take that even further. So a lot of the core engineering, manufacturing sort of processes, they run in standard kind of machine learning models. But when they're actually trying to surface these things to business stakeholders, they're using LLMs to offer a much richer view into what might be actually happening here. So, I don't know if this is going to resonate with everyone, but maybe hopefully with some of you, you'll have something that happens in the technical space and something has gone wrong, an error value or some kind of condition has been exceeded. And as it makes its way through the business and emails get forwarded to successive VPs up the chain, the meaning and the consequence of that gain and snowball in a way that may not quite be commensurate, right, with the actual underlying thing. And so in this case, by using LLM technologies alongside the traditional Python, Jupyter, scikit-learn kinds of things, they're able to actually surface much more intelligent and I would say business context infused dashboards for the business stakeholders. So it's kind of a weird and maybe nuanced way of de-risking some of these things, but that's a really specific way that LLMs can actually bridge something that classically has just been a problem we all just deal with, right?
Thanks, Peter. Amrita, there's lots of risks in banking, so I'm sure you can share some examples with us.
Sure. I was listening to you, Peter, and my mind went to this quote that I read from, I think it was by Mark Zuckerberg, and it goes, "The biggest risk in life is not taking one." And I think that quote really underscores the paradox of risk management today. So coming from the banking side and coming from BNY, we touch 20% of the world's investable assets. We clear $2.5 trillion of USD wire payments every single day. So one might say that we are in the business of risk and risk management. So if you think about traditional risk management, it tended to be very reactive. It rested on periodic reviews, auditing, and also deterministic models that were pretty much rules-based. Not to say that's not gone away, but that's just how risk management was done. Fast forward to today, and you have augmented analysis. I'm keeping away from using the word AI immediately because that's still in process, that's still being tested. But using augmented analysis and some machine learning AI models, today's risk management framework is more proactive in nature. It is enabling decision makers with data in near real-time or real-time basis so they can adapt to events as they unfold. I'll give you two examples that are very real. Fraud. So if you think about a payment process, every time you initiate a payment, there is transaction monitoring going on in your bank. There is risk scoring going on with that payment. There is entity mining because your bankers need to know who the instruction is coming from, who is getting paid. All of these sub-processes, and then there's fraud alerting in case there's some suspicion on that payment activity, right? All of these sub-processes have to happen in a near real-time basis so that the end customer experience is seamless. Now, we've all had this experience at least once where you're on vacation somewhere, you walk into a cafe, enjoying your time, and your credit card gets denied. And it's extremely inconvenient, and it's not a fun experience. Extrapolate that into the corporate banking side. You're not talking about $100 or thousands of dollars. You're talking about multi-millions. So your models, whether they are your deterministic models or your advanced models or AI models, have to have the automated intelligence to make sure that you're doing the right scoring in a way that your end customer is happy, and yet you've managed the risk. The second example, which I think is very relevant, again in the banking space, is KYC, know your customer. Very, very, very crucial data point across the chain of your customer life cycle. You need to know your customer in the banking world before you even prospect that customer, before that person or entity is your client. You have to do KYC at the time of onboarding, at the time of transactions, and at the time of servicing. So this entire life cycle has to be analyzed very, very deeply so that you can actually mine and do entity disambiguation at every point in time. So that's a huge example of where AI models are helping the industry kind of accelerate that transformative process. I'm going to switch that to a commercial opportunity, because every time you do entity disambiguation on your customer, what you're doing is building intelligence about that customer. Who are they? What geography are they in? What is the demographic content of their client base? What are they actually doing? Can you recommend better products for them? You get the drift, right? So today in the banking world, a lot of the risk management techniques, we're kind of flipping them on their back and looking at those from a commercial opportunity technique, and which has been pretty powerful everywhere. And especially as we go into a real-time data monitoring world where we need to have adaptive risk frameworks and adaptive frameworks to react to market events, this sort of transformation through AI enablement will be key. But in the banking world, it is, it's done with the right checks, balances, and a little bit of not so openness because we're so regulated.
Makes sense. What about at Verizon, Elaine?
Sure. To me, I think risk management is a very broad domain, right? You can do a lot of things in risk management field. With AI capabilities, I think what enable us to do, in addition to some of the traditional anomaly detection or risk modeling, it really enable us to do things at scale with large data, be able to provide real-time or near real-time insights and provide more personalized solution on the spot. Right? For example, from the network perspective, we can use AI technology to detect the network failure possibilities, and based on that, we can manage our supply chain and inventory in a more just-in-time fashion and prevent the network failure. In the meantime, save cost, and coupling that with the drone delivery, you can really cut down your logistic cost and also provide high quality network connections to your customers. From the consumer side, you can use AI technology to actively listen in to the conversation when the customer calls in, and you can detect the customer sentiment during the conversation. As the customer sentiment changes, you can detect that potential churn risk so that you can prompt a more personalized solution, either offer a churn mitigation promo to your customer, or train your reps to say some things that can handle the conversation in a more smooth way. Right? And from the supplier risk management, you can use the AI to run a model to identify based on geopolitical, geographic location of the vendor and monitor financial risk, build a model to prevent supplier failure. So all those use cases are very, very possible today. And with AI that enable us, we can do that in a much, much faster turnaround fashion.
Thanks, Elaine. How are things at OpenText, Virgil? How do you guys do this?
So I guess we have lots of customers that do anomaly detection, and similar to Elaine's example of networking, I brought an example that I wanted to talk about, and that's from Philips Healthcare. They provide CT scanners and MRI machines to hospitals and clinics, and they're doing real-time analysis using IoT and some sensors, and then taking it back. And I guess machine learning is what they're doing, some in-database machine learning inside of a Vertica database to detect and find out when these equipment needs to be replaced, and can kind of do proactive maintenance on that. So.
Thanks, Virgil. Moving on to another question related to corporate finance and accounting in AI. So
best suited for our banker here on the panel to start. How is AI transforming corporate finance and accounting? And what are the key benefits and potential challenges of implementing AI-driven solutions in these areas? I can probably even add to this since we do tax accounting at Thomson Reuters.
And I think this is a field, Tamara, very relatable in so many of the processes that happen in corporate finance and accounting, right? So I think AI in corporate finance and accounting has truly been that catalyst that has transformed the one very back office kind of function. And by the way, I grew up in finance, so I get it, to this very front office strategic enabling function. And there's, if I were to think about kind of the three silos in which this automation is truly helping transform the industry, first is automation and reconciliation. I still remember my first job out of college. I was in the accounting department, and what used to happen at that time, an invoice comes in, there's manual matching of the invoice to the purchase order to the payment side, and then that's fraught with errors, that's fraught with a lot of manual labor-intensive work, and that opens us out for fraudulent activity. Fast forward to today again with OCR, with NLP, these technologies are being used today. They have been deployed to extract information from invoices so that automated matching can actually happen. And it saved the accounting department. It saves the accounting department a lot of hours. Of course, the human's in the loop. Again, in banking, I'm going to preface this by saying the human is always going to be in the loop for a foreseeable future. But we have kind of accelerated that process of automation and recon. Second area is FP&A, your financial analysis and planning. FP&A analysts have to do a lot of the financial reporting analysis, forecasting. You have your monthly forecast, your quarterly forecast, your annual planning. Great process, very interesting, but very painful. And you are limited to the data sources that you have and the activities and the market intelligence that you have. AI is transforming that with a lot of narrative science and LLMs coming in where you can chat with your data. And I know we all use GPT, but imagine a finance department using GPT type of capabilities on getting those quick answers so that they can build those resilient models becomes hugely transformative. And then thirdly, and I'll give a very short view on this, but something very dear to my heart is working capital management. The power of AI is the ability to draw meaningful insights that a human eye may miss and to connect the dots and draw that pattern analysis. Working capital management to any treasurer is a very key function. It's no longer tactical. Treasurers are no longer just custodians of liquidity. They're actually making decisions on how this liquidity needs to get optimized. What kind of investment strategies that the CFO and the CEO need to have. And so with, again, AI modeling or augmented intelligence, which I'll say, this is where you can actually see what kind of cash flow forecasting potential there is. A lot of these technologies right now in the banking world are being developed, being used, being trained. They may not be mainstream right away, but the train's left the station, right? So we are on this path, and it's going to be very transformative.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amrita. Elaine, I know you have some thoughts in this area as well.
Yeah, sure. I think as Rita was talking, I can certainly relate to some of the pain points referred to the olden times. Yeah, but I know traditionally in corporate finance, right, they're very conservative in a way. So they're they use very secure way. So for us, the AI technology is mostly used in helping with the productivities and efficiencies, right? Examples like in contract management. We used to have to manually scan, have human eyeballs, all different kind of contracts, and then see if the terms are compliant, and then how do we consolidate those terms and negotiate in a bulk deal with the vendors, etc. But now with the GenAI technologies, we can literally, turn those human labor hours into, a machine work, and then turn out much better and efficient results, so that our analysts can be relieved to focus on the true analysis type of work. And another example would be using a chatbot. So we have chatbot on our internal website to help answer all the questions related to accounts payables and T&Es. So those are like commonly used but frequently asked questions, right? With the chatbot help, you really can relieve a lot of human labors that help answer questions or even Slack people back and forth.
I don't know if anybody's used the chatbot at this hotel, but it doesn't work very well. So maybe one of you guys could help them out, give them some advice on how to use their virtual chatbot here. Virgil, you guys have a lot of experience in this from a tech perspective. How do you look at this?
Sure. I mean, we've created something called Contract Analyzer, which is a contract intelligence solution, very much like Elaine just described, where we use kind of some AI and some NLP to flip through the document and pull out clauses and classify them in certain ways. So, I mean, we're doing that today. Customers are using that to sometimes just find duplicate information, sometimes find what they're obligated to do, sometimes find specific entities that are in documents as well or in contracts, but also to reuse contracts. So they're able to take pieces and take these chunks and just slap them into a new contract as well.
Lots of lawyers use your stuff. We're familiar. Peter, thoughts?
Not so much. I guess the only thing I would say is that in this one area, it is just as maybe many people already know this, but for those who are not aware, you really want a lot of precision and accuracy. And this is where just a naive LLM-based approach is not going to cut it. You really do need to be looking at the forefront of research in agents, in retrieval augmented kind of things, long context. There's a lot of actual nitty-gritty technical work to be done to do this in a way that's reliable. And this is one of those areas where you don't want, like, a single cost can kill an entire project, right? Or a single error. So you want to be very, very careful in this area. And that would be my only comment on this.
As we talked before the panel, Peter, I know you had a lot of real-world examples and case studies. Could you share some of those real-world examples where AI has enhanced BI and risk management?
Yeah, I guess, yes. So one interesting thing, it's related to the BI thing. And what I would say is that, we are really known for our Python tools and data science and Jupyter notebooks. Maybe some of these things are familiar folks here in the audience. And something that was strange to us, we had the idea, which I think everyone had, which is, hey, let's build a coding assistant for people who are trying to learn how to do Python, right? Many people who are in the business analytics world, they want to learn some of this stuff. People who are not programmers, they frequently pick up Python as their first language. They do some data analysis in a notebook. So we said, okay, that's great. So we go and find all these notebooks. We scrape a lot of that. We do a lot of processing on our own to try to optimize it for more of an educational kind of orientation. And then when we actually put it in practice, what we realized was that the way that people do an interactive analytic with a notebook is very different than what they publish and what you actually can scrape off the internet. And so this is just one of those, it's an example, real world example of how, it's not obvious. You think, okay, if we want to have a coding assistant for people in notebooks, we just take a lot of notebooks, look at the text that people wrote and some of the Python code they tried, and then train on that or fine tune some model and then apply that, and boom, you've got a coding assistant. And you kind of do, but it's not as great as if you actually train on watching people actually interact with like a cloud-based system where you actually see they're trying this, they're trying that. And that interactive mode is very different than kind of the static mode. So even something like that where the end result is the same, the coding languages are the same, the humans are the same humans. They're all trying to learn Python. But what you train on and how people use an interactive system that is AI augmented, right, is different than simply taking a bunch of static work that represents the end of the result of a lot of thinking, a lot of crafting, and only training on that. So maybe that can give maybe some inspiration to some problems you're currently thinking of in terms of applying LLMs to. Another example of a real world thing that people, a real world situation, I guess, is that bigger is not always better, right? So we do hear all the press releases, people building these giant models, huge models, and when we were trying to build some of our coding assistant kind of things, we looked at, okay, well, if we want to build coding assistants for people, Excel users, we have this new Excel plugin that lets you do Python and Excel. We worked on it with Microsoft. Those people are going to really need some assistance, not just in terms of how to write Python code, but how to think about using these advanced tools in the data science ecosystem and applying that to the real world problems. And there's just not as much data available for that you can go scrape. And so while it is true that more data is better and whatnot, high quality data is way better. So in our case, then when we actually sat down and put in a smaller set of fine tunes that were specifically oriented towards the mentality of an Excel user approaching data science for the first time and what they might be likely to do, a small amount of that data actually went a long way, it turns out. So even though bigger is better, it doesn't mean that if you have small data, you can't actually get something going if you have high quality data. So, and that's especially the case now as we see in the research press and generally in the industry, people are realizing that that these models can get much smaller and be incredibly efficient. You can take these giant models and quantize them or ablate them down to something very small and have it be still very efficient. So there's something there that where I think we're, as an industry, overpaying a lot in terms of compute costs, in terms of data. We're probably overpaying a lot, and we'll figure out how to not have to overpay. So I just want to give people some encouragement that don't think, oh, we only have a little bit of data. We don't have terabytes and terabytes of training data that we can't do something with LLMs. You actually probably can if you have a very specific and high quality set of data that you can apply to a very specific problem.
Thanks, Peter. That makes sense. I know OpenText has definitely real world examples. You want to share some, Virgil?
We have a few customers. One of our customers is the government of Canada. And what they've done, in fact, we've been a customer for 6 years or so. And what they started doing was 6 years ago, they were going to be part of the G7 summit. And they were interested in what their citizens thought of the topics, right? And so they literally scraped Twitter and looked for topics related to the G7 summit. And they needed a tool that can look at a 140-character tweet and tell if it conceptually was about women's rights or was about something else. So they used us, our text mining stuff, to kind of get this concept. Then they also detected sentiment from that. So this is a positive or negative connotation towards this, as well. And then they'd use that to help guide their conversation for the G7 summit when they had hosted that. They're continuing to use that today with kind of their citizen experience portal, and they're constantly monitoring their citizens for their sentiment to see if they're on track. So.
Thanks. Great example. What about Verizon, Elaine? Any real world examples?
Oh, we have a lot of real world examples. I don't know if any of you attended the morning sessions. You probably heard we talk about our customer experience AI-based solutions. So we recently launched the AI-based solution to help improve our customer experience by predicting the customer's intent when they reach us from either channel, and then we can route that customer's contact or call or text or chat into the most optimized channel, and based on the reps' skill sets, we match them with the most suitable reps to provide better customer experience. And with the AI solution, we also help our reps to significantly reduce the handle time so that we have customers be more happier and stay with us longer. So that's one of the real life example.
That's great. Thanks. Amrita, anything from BNY?
We have something, it's called a settlements fail indicator, and it's been something that we're really proud of. It's a predictor model. It predicts the risk of default by any dealer on a 15-minute interval. So, and the data that it uses is the intraday liquidity, the balance data that we have of the $45 trillion of assets under custody, so that our dealers can know in advance if their counterparty is likely to default, so that they can go and manage their borrowing if need be. This has, we are a systemically significant financial institution. So this kind of modeling has helped us maintain our liquidity, but is also helping stabilize the market in case of any upswing.
Thank you. And I think the last question is really for me, so I know what to invest in. And that is reflective of what are the future trends and innovations. So I'd love to know from each of you what you guys are seeing as future trends and innovations. I will say last year, because we are a big tax and accounting technology company, those are two areas we focus on. We looked at a lot of legal tech, AI legal tech last year, and made several great investments. This year, we're leaning into tax, which I think is another area that's ripe for applying AI. What do you see as the future trends, Elaine?
I think as the more and more people started to embrace AI solutions, and we're going to see a lot more integration with the AI-empowered technology into your very familiar technical stacks, from all the way from the BI solution to your daily productivity tools like your PowerPoints, your Excel, right, your emails. One thing to keep in mind is I always think of one quote from Spider-Man movie, right? With great responsibility, with great power, you need to take greater responsibilities. So be mindful that more and more AI-related legislations, compliance, laws are going to come out and become more and more stringent. So as an enterprise, you need to be prepared, build your governance, AI governance program from day one, and build your AI literacy program, educate your users so that you can have more adoption in a more safe way, practice responsible AI. That's going to be the trend.
Thank you. Let's go right down the row in order. Peter, your thoughts on future trends?
So I think in the near to medium term, we're coming around the bend on understanding and what's generally called interpretability. Right? LLMs considered black boxes right now. We throw a bunch of stuff in there. It does magic. Sometimes it does the wrong magic, and we don't know why. I think we're getting around that problem. We'll have interpretability and smaller models that can be chained together and can be governed. So a lot of the safety stuff will actually become very crisp. And this is interesting because building on what Elaine said, right now, we all talk about safety, and we know this thing's kind of like weird and radioactive, maybe does something bad. But when it actually becomes crisp and understandable, now it actually becomes regulatable. Now you can actually put policies in place around it. So we should absolutely expect to see more of that coming down the line and becoming best practices for engineering, for business practices, and things like that. So that'll be actually quite nice to see, because that will then unleash the proper and full-scale business adoption of this stuff. Right now, we know everyone's kind of holding back a little bit because you're not quite sure, is it legal? What data was it trained on? All that kind of stuff. So I'm really excited about actually that wave coming once we turn around the corner on that stuff.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on that. Amrita, thoughts?
I completely second what Peter said. I think if you look at, especially in banking and financial services, it's almost like an S curve, right? Where we may not yet be at that point of inflection because of the compliance reasons and, ethical reasons. But once we hit that, what we're going to have to work on is that rapid adoption. And it'll happen because you're seeing the industries around the banking and financial services rapidly adopting these technologies. And that's just in that S curve. I think we're very close to that inflection point. As we're seeing more of this and more banks and other financial services kind of creating that consortium of ideas around how they can use this technology, there will be widespread adoption, and it'll be a good thing.
Yeah, agree. Virgil, your take on future trends?
So, of course, we're going to release our version of BI for the LLMs. So for us, the immediate future is this, Gen AI version of business intelligence, which is nice. But I think longer term is more of a collaborative AI approach, right? So AIs, they all seem to be siloed still, and all the cool little devices we get are all kind of still by themselves. And it was almost 10 years ago, I think I saw a TED Talk where a guy said, the minute my smart thermostat can tell my smart drapes to go down, and then my smart light comes up a little bit to compensate, then things are working together and collaborating. And that's an example of in hardware, but in the banking or whatever else. So, it happened to me just yesterday. My credit card was declined because of fraud, except it wasn't fraud, right? So there's some work to be done. It was really me, and so I think that collaboration is next.
Couldn't agree more. And that concludes our panel for today. I know any of these folks here would be happy if you reached out if you have any additional questions, but thank you for staying. And hopefully you found this to be informative and you learned something. Thanks again.